Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call?
No.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we're at a critical juncture in our investigation into Russian interference in last year's election and potential collusion by Americans with that Russian meddling and obstruction of justice that may have occurred. Those issues are under investigation by the Judiciary Committee, which has a unique responsibility because we exercise oversight concerning the Department of Justice and the FBI. So the firing of James Comey, among other actions that raise issues regarding potential collusion and obstruction of justice, is very much appropriate and necessary for our inquiry to determine. And we also have a unique responsibility because only the Judiciary Committee can make public for the American people to know and understand what happened that may involve obstruction of justice, and equally important, what can be done to prevent it in the future. The Committee on the Judiciary of the United States Senate can legislate. There are other investigations ongoing involving the special counsel, who will determine criminal culpability, the intelligence committees of both the House and the Senate, which have a counterterrorism responsibility, but they rarely legislate in the way that the Judiciary Committee does. I'm proud to serve on the Judiciary Committee. I greatly respect the leadership of our committee, Chairman Grassley, who is a straight shooter and cares deeply about the integrity of our judicial process, as well as a long-standing and distinguished record of protecting whistleblowers, and our ranking member, Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, who has been a steadfast champion of judicial integrity. But every week, we are seeing cascading disclosures that reflect potential collusion or cooperation between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. And these disclosures reflect as well on the obstruction of justice that is front and center for the Judiciary Committee's investigation. Just this week, through a stunning expose in The Atlantic, later confirmed by Donald Trump Jr. himself, the American people learned of secret exchanges between WikiLeaks and Donald Trump Jr. during the 2016 presidential campaign. The exchanges began in September 2016, 2 months before the election. Over the course of those exchanges, WikiLeaks sent literally dozens of messages to Trump Jr., who sent back at least 3 messages. He acted at WikiLeaks' behest at least one time, tweeting out a link to John Podesta Jr.'s hacked emails after WikiLeaks' suggestion. He told other high-ranking officials on the Trump campaign that WikiLeaks had reached out to him in an extraordinarily revealing message. At no point did he rebuff these advances. In fact, just the opposite. At no point did he reject those overtures from WikiLeaks. And what we are seeing, particularly in the familiar tone, almost intimate nature of these exchanges back and forth, is the possibility that we may have before us just the tip of the iceberg in those exchanges. These revelations are stunning. They're jaw-dropping. The son of the President of the United States, then a candidate, actively engaged and may have been coordinating strategy with a group that the current CIA director has called a hostile intelligence service. The present director of the CIA, appointed by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, characterized WikiLeaks as a hostile intelligence service, and that's a direct quote, and then observed that it's often abetted by hostile nation states like Russia. Without subpoenaing Donald Trump Jr. to testify in public, we cannot be sure we have the full record. One of the most stunning aspects of this exchange, indeed, was its very personal tone, and many who read the coverage may sense and feel, understandably and rightly, that we're reading fragments of a longer and larger conversation that may have involved other participants or relied on other means of communication, and we are left inevitably and inexorably with some very, very key questions. How did Donald Trump Jr. know of WikiLeaks' plans to leak Podesta's emails before they were even released? Why did WikiLeaks feel confident that it could inform Trump Jr. that they had hacked Podesta's emails without worrying that he would turn this information over to law enforcement? Hacking is a crime. How could WikiLeaks be in the least bit confident that Donald Trump Jr. would not report that crime to proper authorities? And he did not. Perhaps most crucially, why would Trump Jr. see an invitation from WikiLeaks to coordinate efforts as anything other than an inappropriate, unethical, and potentially illegal act? Given the stakes, my expectation was, and the American people could likewise expect the same, that our committee would act quickly and transparently to answer those questions raised by these messages, as well as the interview conducted by our committee staff of Donald Trump Jr. That's what I was expected when these messages were first provided to the Judiciary Committee roughly 2 months ago. My expectation was that Donald Trump Jr. would be compelled to testify, that he would be subpoenaed to provide a full record of his communications relating to Russian interference in our elections. Surely those subpoenas that were discussed, even issued over the summer, would now be reissued and enforced. The lack of action has been frustrating to me, and likewise, I have been disappointed that we've made virtually no progress towards scheduling a public hearing with Donald Trump Jr. and other key individuals involved in this investigation. The subpoenas have not been reissued. I've called repeatedly for that action to be taken. The documents have not been subpoenaed, those key documents that are so relevant and necessary to our investigation have not been subpoenaed, as I have asked to be done repeatedly. And that's why I'm here today, to raise concerns about the Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation into Russian interference in our election, possible collusion by the Trump campaign, and obstruction of justice. The threat is that that investigation is stalling. The danger of lack of progress is depriving the American people of information they deserve. I recognize that congressional investigations must operate methodically and systematically, and in some cases, confidentially, until the committee is ready to release its findings. But that confidentiality can serve an important purpose if it aids an investigation, not if it engenders the kind of lack of trust that is clearly a possibility here. Not if it engenders that trust or lack of trust, not if it endangers confidence and trust in the process. There may be a need for confidentiality to encourage cooperation of witnesses, but ultimately, the American people deserve disclosure. There is a need for impetus and urgency in this investigation. The American people must be made aware of key facts and issues raised by these documents and the interviews conducted so far. And my hope is that colleagues will join me in asking for more progress, more disclosure, more transparency, because the American people need and deserve that kind of disclosure. Without the exposure provided by a free and independent press, justice delayed could have extended into justice denied. That's the danger. Secrecy threatens to stall the investigation, and my hope is that we will have the kind of transparency in greater measure that is necessary for trust and confidence in this investigation. I hope that my colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee will join me in demanding that Donald Trump Jr. and other key figures in the investigation testify under subpoena, in public, under oath, and that documents be subpoenaed as well. The Senate Judiciary Committee has a particularly critical role in exposing the truth. Even if criminal charges are never brought, the American people have a right to know whether their public officials have held themselves to a standard of honesty, loyalty, and integrity that they have a right to expect. This body is in the best position to provide that measure of truth, hopefully the whole truth, to the American people. There are many members whose leadership on this issue I appreciate. As I mentioned, Senator Feinstein, who is sending a second tranche of letters this afternoon on this investigation. But we are allowing time to pass without progress. That opportunity, once lost, cannot be recovered with the measure of importance that it deserves. We must issue subpoenas. We must hold public hearings. We must get to the truth, and it must be done now. Thank you, Mr. President. I will refer these remarks to my colleagues with great respect for them and for the leadership of this committee, and I will come back to the floor. I will return to this subject because I think it is so critically important, and the American people deserve more information, and they deserve better. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.